Hi everyone, thanks for watching. I'm going to show you how you can create a very simple bouncing ball project using Processing.py. First step is to download Processing. You can find that at the processing.org website. Click on download, scroll down. I'm going to be using the 3.5.4 stable release, and they have different versions of it here that you can download. So if you want to follow along with me, that's what I'm using. Once you have it downloaded, it will look, and open it up, it'll look similar to this. In order to use Python module, you have to click on this drop down, click on add mode, find the Python mode, download that. Once you have the Python mode downloaded, you should be able to use this little drop down to select Python, and that is what we're going to be using to create this bouncing ball tutorial. With processing, it makes it a lot easier to use graphics and images in Python. So we're going to start off by setting up the screen. The first thing I'm going to say is size 600 by 600. And that's just going to be the width and the height of my screen that I can draw to. And when you do that, you can press play. And you can see a 600 by 600 window pops up that we're able to draw on or add images on, things like that. Next up, I want to give it a background color. So I'm going to say background 0. And that will give us that all black background that we want. Next up, we are going to create an ellipse. But in order to create an ellipse, I want that ellipse to show up on my background. So I'm going to say fill 255. And that's going to make that ellipse that I create just white. Next up, I'm going to create my ellipse. My ellipse will take 4 arguments or 4 parameters. The first is going to be an x value. The second is going to be a y value. And then you're going to have a width and a height. And when I press play, I see that I have a black background. My shape is filled in with that white color. And I created it at 10x, 50y, and it's 40 pixels by 40 pixels width and height. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but the 0, 0 of the coordinate plane is going to be in the upper left-hand corner. So if I made this 0, 0 for my x and y of my ellipse, you can see it shows up just in the corner there. With ellipses, when they get drawn in processing, it starts from the center out. So the center of the circle would be 0, 0 in this case. Let's move that into the center of the screen. So when we created our size 600 by 600, what processing does is it creates a global variable called width and height. So I'm able to say width divided by 2 and height divided by 2 to put that circle right in the center of my screen. Processing comes with 2 built-in functions, and it's really important to use these. So I'm going to copy and paste this code into those functions. The first one is setup. And this does kind of like what it sounds. I would set my size to be in my setup. I'm just going to cut it and paste it into this new function setup. The other function that comes built in is draw. So the draw function works a little bit differently. It gets called over and over again in processing until you stop it with maybe no loop or something like that. So the setup function just gets called once, and then the draw function gets called over and over and over again. And let me see if I can demonstrate how this is working. So I'm going to cut this code and I'm going to paste it inside of my draw function. Make sure I have this tabbed over. So if I press play now, I will get the same circle in the center of the screen. But if I put the background maybe after I draw the ellipse, then I will not see the ellipse anymore. The reason why is the ellipse is being drawn and then the background is being drawn on top of it over and over again, so you'll never quite see the ellipse. So the order that you draw things on is important. So I'm going to put it back at the top. We have our background, we have our fill, we have our ellipse. But because this is a bouncing ball, we kind of want this circle to move around the screen. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give you an example of how you could use mouse.x and mouse.y. So for our ellipse, let's set our x value to be mouse x, so the x value of the mouse, and mouse y. And then when I press play, this ellipse, this circle, follows my mouse around. Wherever my mouse is, this will follow around. Now what if we had that, but maybe we moved our background into our setup. So the background only gets called once, and then this draw function gets called over and over and over again, creating this ellipse. Let's see what happens. It's almost like a paint program where we could put this circle or this ellipse over and over top, over and over again. This is pretty interesting too, but this is not exactly what we want, but it is pretty fun. Let me close this. We kind of want our circle to bounce around the screen, so we want to change the circle x value, and maybe we want to change the speed as well. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a couple global variables. I'm going to create circle x. I'm going to set that equal to 0.0. I'm going to create a circle y. I'm going to set that equal to 0.0. And I will create an x speed. Set that equal to 3.0. And I'll create a y speed and set that equal to 3.0 as well. Alright, let me move my background back down into my draw function. So now that we have these global variables, if we want to use them in one of these functions, we have to first say global, and then we have to list out the different global variables that we want to use. So in this case, we want to use circle x, circle y, x speed, and y speed. And these I'm just separating with a comma and listing them out so that I can use them in my function draw. Alright, I'm going to put my circle x inside of my first parameter for my ellipse, so my x value for the ellipse is going to be equal to circle x. Next, I'm going to change the value of circle x. So I'm going to say circle x is equal to circle x plus x speed. And when I press play, my circle moves across. I see that I still have my mouse Y in here. I think I'm going to change this to height divided by 2 for now. So yeah, so my parameters for my ellipse are circle x, height divided by 2, so it'll be in the middle, and its width is 40, its height is 40, and then I'm changing the x value by the speed. So circle x is equal to circle x plus speed, and when I press play, the ellipse kind of moves across the screen and then just disappears. And that's not exactly what we want, because we want a bouncing ball. But I am going to show you a little bit of a shortcut for this line right here. Circle x is equal to circle x plus speed. An easier way of writing that is just to write circle x plus equals x speed. And it will mean it'll do exactly the same thing when we press play. It's just a little bit shorter to write. So that plus equals is a little bit of a shortcut. And it's just going to increment the circle x by the x speed. And we see the ball move across. But we don't want it just to disappear, we want it to bounce. So you guys are probably thinking about how you might make it bounce. If you want to pause and try it yourself, you can. If you want to do it with me, just keep the video playing. I will show you. The next line is we're going to put in an if statement. If circle x is greater than width, we can use that global variable again. Then we want x speed to equal to maybe minus 3.0. Let's try it again. Let's run it and see if we get a bounce. Alright, we bounced off one side and then we disappeared off the other. So I think we need to add another if statement. Maybe you want to pause the video, figure out what if statement we are going to put in there. If you want to follow along, I will do it right now. If circle x is less than 0, x speed is equal to 3. When we press play, the circle will bounce off one side, it will come back to the other side. It should bounce off, but it doesn't. I noticed I made a spelling error, so be very careful with your capitalization. In my case, I had a capital P when I should have a lowercase p. When we press play, our circle will bounce off one side, should bounce off the other side as well. And we have the beginning of a bouncing ball. Alright, we're getting the ball to bounce back and forth, but I think we can make this code a little bit simpler. So we're able to get the ball to bounce back and forth, but let's simplify this code a little bit. One thing we can do is we can do this all in one if statement. So if circle x is greater than width, or if circle x is less than 0, so if it's off either side of the screen, what we're going to do is say x speed is equal to x speed times minus 1. What this will do is it will change the direction of the ball depending on no matter what side of the screen it goes off. It will just multiply x speed by minus 1, changing either from negative to positive or positive to negative, and change the direction. So when we press play, the ball is bouncing back and forth, and we've simplified our code just a little bit. But our ball is only bouncing in one direction. We're just changing the x speed. So let's do the same with the y speed. Let's add in circle y here. And let's say circle y plus equals y speed. And when we press play, it flies off the bottom of the screen. So we need those same kind of if statements to check if our circle y is greater than the height or if the circle y is less than 0. So I'm going to copy this and I'm going to paste it down below. And I'm going to change this to circle y, circle y. I'm going to change this from width to height. And I'm going to change this to y speed. And when we do that, we get the ball bouncing back and forth. I think maybe we can increase the speed of one of these a little bit and see what happens. You get the ball bouncing all over the screen. But I still think we can improve it a little bit. So let's keep working. So one thing that processing has built in is it has these values called p-vectors. So a p-vector allows us to store two values. So we could store a x and a y value. We could store velocity for x, velocity for y, and that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to create a variable called location, and we're going to set it to be equal to a p-vector, so capital P, capital V vector. And we can put two values in here. In fact, we need to put two values in here. I'm going to start with the location as 100 and 100, so 100x, 100y. Next up, I'm going to put in another variable called velocity. And again, that's going to be a p-vector. Maybe I'll set it to 2.5 and 5. Make those speeds slightly different, so we'll have a speed for x and a speed for y. So we can store all of these values we did up here in 4 different variables. We can store this in 2 variables. Now we're going to need to change these global variables to be location and velocity. And then we're going to go through, and this ellipse is going to appear at location.x and location.y. So we're out of this p-vector location. I'm just going to delete these variables for now. We are pulling out the 100 with location.x, and we're pulling out this 100 with location.y. I'm going to keep this size to be the same, 400 by 400. Circle x is now location x. Excuse me, location.x. And x speed is now velocity.x. So this will be location.y and velocity.y. Location.x, location.x. This is going to be velocity.x. This will be location.y. And this will be velocity. Alright, I think I've changed everything. It should work the same as it did before. We get the bouncing ball bouncing off all four sides, and we're able to do it with a little bit cleaner code. We will do another video getting further into the p-vectors, because the p-vectors have a lot of extra functionality that we're not quite using in our example right here. Just to make you aware of it, on the Processing.py site, they do have reference. They have all of these information, all these different functions that you can use. We were using the p-vector, which you can find right here, and there's extra information on it. So don't be afraid to look up the documentation as well, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.